When we ask such functional questions, we have to be a bit sophisticated about it. If we take a particular one, like, which at first sight is difficult, like why do we enjoy music, say, how would you go about giving a functional explanation for that?
Yeah, I don't think everything has a functional explanation. In fact, it's pretty important that not everything have a functional explanation, or it would be too easy. I think a proper functional explanation has to start with some kind of engineering analysis, completely independent of what we know about human beings or whatever the organism is. So let's take, for example, stereo vision, the ability to combine the images from the two eyes to get an impression of depth. One can do a bit of geometry on a piece of paper and show why it would make sense to combine the images from two cameras at slightly different vantage points. And indeed, if one were to build a robot that had to navigate an environment, it would make sense to build in stereo vision. We could look at the design specs for a stereo vision system, then bring our human being into the lab, look at how human stereo vision works, and see how well the design specs from the engineering analysis match up with what we empirically observe in humans. The closer the fit, the more confidence that we have that the function of stereo vision is to see in depth. When you don't have the engineering analysis, when you just observe that something is present in humans, it is impossible, I think, to make a proper functional or adaptationist explanation. And music might be an example. As important as music is in our lives, as much pleasure as it gives us, as much use we give it in social circumstances, it's completely unclear to me why it would have to be music that would do any of those things. Why would notes in certain rhythmic and harmonic relations be a solution to any engineering problem? And it's possible, and it's an empirical issue, that music is actually a byproduct of other adaptations. Perhaps our sensitivity to speech, a harmonically rich sound that the brain has to analyze into its frequency components in order to understand speech. Perhaps a byproduct of emotional calls that go way back in primate evolutionary history, sighs, moans, laughs, cries, and so on. Possibly a byproduct of motor control, keeping your bodily actions at a constant optimal rhythm. And maybe what music does is it combines bits and pieces of all these other parts of the brain, packs them into a supernormal stimulus, something that actually presses our buttons harder than anything in the natural environment would, and we enjoy it. At least that's another hypothesis, and it shows not everything has to be an adaptation.
Let me see if I've got that right. You're saying that in order to analyze speech, the brain has to have certain mechanisms for taking frequencies, analyzing harmonics and things. Otherwise, we couldn't tell the difference between, say, vowel sounds. I mean, the difference between ah and oo and is that's not in itself musical, but the same software mechanisms, the same brain mechanisms that you need in order to tell whether you've got an ah, an or an oo, can't help being supernormally stimulated by, say, pure tones or notes that stay the same for a long time, or harmonies, chords, harmonious chords. Is that something like what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. At least it's certainly a viable hypothesis, and I think it's more plausible than any hypothesis that tries to find some function in music.
Okay. And the sense of rhythm, would that also come from speech, or do you think that might, I mean, the enjoyment of rhythm, do you think that comes from speech, or does that come from somewhere else?
I suspect it comes more from motor control, and it is significant that as far as I know, in all cultures, people move to music. They dance, they clap, they snap, they sway, and certainly for many kinds of motor activities, there is an optimal rhythm, depending on the impedance of your body and the work, pounding, running, scraping.
Because our limbs are sort of natural pendulums and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so I think one would build into any robotic system an ability to do something at a particular rhythm, perhaps even a pleasure in finding the optimal rhythm, and it's possible that music taps into that. Now, I've got to add that people in music hate this theory.
Oh, really?
They are ultra-adaptationists, I think because of a confusion. So I think there's a confusion between adaptation in the technical sense of biology, namely a trait that, compared to alternatives, enhance the rate of reproduction of our ancestors. That's what a biologist means by an adaptation. In everyday conversation, if something's adaptive, it means it's healthy, it's valuable, it allows you to improve, it makes life worth living. And of course, music is all those things, but it's just a different sense of adaptation.
Life-enhancing. Yes.
Life-enhancing, exactly. Yes. And I like to say that it's a mistake to equate adaptation in the biologist sense, which is what we were just talking about, with what is worthy in life. In fact, they're often at cross purposes. So reading, for example, which is almost certainly not an adaptation, because it just appeared too recently in human evolutionary history for it to have left its mark on the genome, is one of the things that makes life worth living. It's not an adaptation. And one could argue perhaps genocide is an adaptation, that one tribe, whenever it's convenient and has the means, will wipe out another tribe that could have been selected for. And of course, that is
not life-enhancing.
Not life-enhancing.